There are things so easy to grasp that there is simply no need to wrap it up in any simple terms. You are what you are fighting for. And that makes us Europe, because we spill blood for it and for its values. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane on UATV channel explaining hard things in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. A grim anniversary. 1 year of Russia's war against Ukraine was 2 days ago. Let us speculate today what Comrade Putin thinks before he falls asleep. Is he happy? Is he burdened with responsibility? Is he thinking about making his 7 meters long negotiation table even longer after Ukraine will win? Maybe he hears that sound, that annoying, frightening sound of his country's falling apart, and the sound gets louder and louder every hour, because there are all reasons for that. Representatives of 5 regions of the Russian Federation announced the holding of referendums for independence from Russia. It took place on the special site. It is National Online Referendum for Self-Determination of the Republic of the Russian Federation. And it says indigenous peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of those rights, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue the economic, social and cultural future. From the United Nations Declaration of Rights, using these resource, indigenous nations under Moscow's control can vote and decide whether they want to stay under it or break free to sovereignty and independence. Almost 5 million votes has been collected to this day, out of which about 200,000 votes outside of Russia. 5 regions vote for self-determination and independence. Ural, yes, 68.7%. Siberia, yes, 62.8%. Ingria, which is St. Petersburg, yes, 65.7%. Königsberg, yes, 72.1%. And Kuban says yes, 56.1%. The regions of the empire have the right for independence, says the site. An empire that started a war has no place in the civilized world and must be destroyed. We're not saying these figures are absolute and absolutely accurate. We don't know yet. But we will know. After Ukraine's victory, a movement towards indigenous nations' freedom and independence will start, and that is a fact. One thing is obvious. While Russia is growing weaker, Ukraine is growing stronger. But you know what? Maybe we were strong enough back then. And maybe the terrible year had not made us, but showed who we actually are. And maybe Ukrainian institutions are much stronger than the enemy and even allies had ever expected.
Українські інституції набагато міцніші.
Ukrainian institutions are much stronger than the enemy and even allies expected. Achievements and challenges, victories and successes are all part of Ukraine's path of invincibility. First of all, these are our military victories. Victory in the Battle of Kyiv, the liberation of Chernihiv region, the liberation of Sumy region, Kharkiv region, the liberation of Zmyny Island, the liberation of Kherson, hundreds of towns and villages, with blue and yellow flags again. Second, it's the Ukrainian army. It is one of the strongest in Europe and the world. The security and defense forces have been and will be an absolute priority for our government.
We live in a small world, dear world. Fragile we are. And we are connected to each other, whether we want it or not. So if you act here, there is always a counteraction. And if you start an unjust, criminal, absurd war, here and there is only one end to it. You can think you can have right to kill, murder and rape because you convinced yourself in it and you have a bunker and $1 trillion. But the only question always was and still is just one. Who's there on your side?
A year ago, on this day, Russia decided to try to change the borders of Europe by force. And through this year, Russia has tried, in every possible way, to break the will and spirit of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine did not break. Instead, led by President Zelensky and Ukraine's heroes on the front lines, your bravery and determination have inspired the world and united us behind your fight for freedom. In the face of Russia's attempt to take the capital, you stood and fought and repelled the Russian troops from the very first days of the full-scale invasion. Over the course of the last year, you have liberated over 70,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian land, freeing Ukrainian villages, towns, and cities from the torture, death, and destruction that Russia's forces brought with them. and left in their wake. Russia failed to anticipate your resilience and our resolve to help you prevail, to ensure that we do not pass to our children a world in which might makes right. As President Biden's representative in Kyiv, I am so proud of our support for your existential fight for survival and our collective fight on the front lines of freedom. Slava Ukraini.
Ukraine will win. We already are winning. A year-long war trial showed it all right.
If we complete all our tasks, victory will inevitably await us. I'm sure that there will be a victory I really want to this year. We have everything for this: motivation, confidence, friends, diplomacy. We have united all forces against this invasion. I think that no country in the world can stand alone in such an aggressive war. Perhaps the US could, but fortunately it has no borders with the Russian Federation. Ukraine does not oppose itself. Our friends help us fight for common values, so that this war does not go further, so that this aggression does not go any further. We understand exactly what Putin wants, what the Kremlin wants, what the military political leadership of the Russian Federation wants. So it is very important that each of us focuses, that everyone works in their place. And then there will be victory, because the truth is on our side.
Raise your voice. Choose your side. Make your choice. Even if you think you have nothing to do with Ukraine, make the choice in your heart. Because choices left without making have a grim tendency to be made by someone else. On the eve of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, roughly 3/4 of United Nations member states endorsed a resolution called for just and lasting peace. China and India were among the major abstentions. In all, 141 countries voiced support for the resolution. 7 opposed it: Russia, Belarus, North Korea, Syria, Mali, Eritrea, and Nicaragua. Another 32 countries abstained during the vote. China, India, South Africa, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and much of Africa and Central Asia were among them. The level of support was similar to comparable previous General Assembly votes relating to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Mali and Eritrea moved from abstaining to voting against the resolution. Western hopes of potentially swaying India's vote at the last were dashed. South Sudan, however, moved from past abstentions on the conflict to voting in favor of the motion, with its delegates saying this was partly because of the country's own recent legacy of civil war and the UN's role in helping to defuse it. General Assembly resolutions are not binding and carry mainly symbolic weight at the United Nations. However, unlike at the Security Council, Russia cannot unilaterally veto them.
But the truth is, if Russia stops fighting, this war ends. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends. And the human suffering would continue every single day. Abduction, rape, torture. Children counting to 45 every single day to save their lives. The war's global trade of devastation would continue. Inflation, energy shortages, hunger. That's why today's vote is also about all of our futures. Today, each and every one of us here has to choose: to stand isolated with the oppressor or to unite for peace, to stay silent or to protect our UN Charter.
Hungary's Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó, meanwhile, appeared to appeal to Western countries to put more of their efforts into securing peace negotiations rather than either arming Ukraine or sanctioning Russia.
Based on our experience, it became pretty obvious that neither delivery of weapons nor sanctions, those measures do not save lives. To the contrary, they contribute to the prolongation and to the risk of escalation of this war, and they bring more suffering. Peter Szijjártó, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary.
Dear Mr. Szijjártó, as usual for Hungary these days, your words about experience means only one thing. Your experience is dead wrong, sir. Your Hungarian Secret Service probably has failed to fill you in again, so let me help. We in Ukraine and the whole world are at war that was started by a Russian dictator, spoiled by impunity and quarter to century of unlimited power so much that he has adapted the Russian constitution to his own habits. And he invaded our homeland and killed, and is killing right now, our families and us. Maybe when a thug breaks into your home, you in Hungary gather around a negotiation table and start a diplomatic session of talking sense to this brutal criminal while he rapes your wife and takes away your children. But that, obviously, as the voting shows, is not a habit in most of the countries. Because peace, Mr. Scherto, is not when hostilities end. Peace is when no dictator starts a war. Putin says he'll suspend Russia's involvement in last nuclear treaty with the United States after Biden's visit to Kiev. Russian Tsar Tuesday announced he would suspend Russia's last remaining arms control treaty with the United States in rumbling 90-minute speech to lawmakers and military leaders, reiterating many of his earlier culture war talking points and rants about Western elites a day after President Joe Biden's surprise visit to Kiev. I just don't understand it, dear world. Wasn't that what Putin wanted? Because it was Putin who brought Zelensky to Congress and Biden to Kiev. It is Putin who, in controversy to any imaginable logic, just keeps bringing us tanks, fighter jets, worldwide glory, hundreds of billions of dollars, while he's sitting in his bunker clinging to power at all cost until death does these two apart. And mark my words, it will be Putin who will bring us the inevitable victory over himself and our future thrive and prosperity for generations to come. So, shouldn't he be happy? For he himself, Putin the Great, first and the last, have made a first visit to Ukraine by a United States president in nearly 15 years, a reality. He wanted to make history. Here we go, he succeeded. History is made in front of his very eyes. It is Putin who made sure Ukraine's and America's leaders held in-depth discussions about frontline developments and steps to strengthen Ukraine's defense capabilities against him. It is Putin who made United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken to announce a new package of security assistance for Ukraine valued almost $500 million, including ammunition for howitzers and the HIMARS rocket systems, Javelin missiles and air surveillance radars, you name it. It is thanks to Putin United States will also provide Kiev with extra $10 million in emergency assistance to maintain Ukraine's energy infrastructure. It was Vladimir Putin who has made sure a new wave of sanctions against individuals and companies that are trying to invade or backfill Russia's war machine is happening. It is thanks to Putin. If there was ever a point when Biden and his aides hoped to avoid personalizing the Russian criminal warfare in general, it was over long before last week's grim anniversary. And it was Putin who changed Biden's heart. Biden has declared Putin a war criminal and a pure thug, accusing Russia of genocide in Ukraine. So, what's wrong, Comrade Putin? That will be all good news for today in our weekly wrap-up on UATV channel, brought to you by our gorgeous UATV team and me, Henry Keane, for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. Stay safe and tuned for more.